Bryan, and that was the opening to the amazingly beautiful Madrigal by Phillippe Gaubert. I'd like to talk a little bit about this piece and also use it to talk about sound and what we can do with our sound when we're playing. There's so much that we can do in terms of variety and colour, and this piece always screams out to me. If a beautiful piece can scream, it always calls out to me as being just one of the most exquisite pieces in the repertoire, and it's relatively simple, but I think it's a lovely basis for us to talk a little bit about sound and also work on some details in the piece itself. So let's start at the beginning. It's a good place, and I think it's always important with any piece of music that we decide what atmosphere we want to create at the beginning. It's in the lowish register here, so it's very easy to want to produce a rich sound. I think flute players often, I think the technical term is tank out the low register in order to show their sort of prowess in that area of the instrument, but only do that if the music requires it. And I think here you want to almost risk something a little bit more hazy. It's only piano, and you know, we've got a long way to go, so it's lovely, I think, if this opening can just be very singing but very understated. So too with the vibrato. I think if the vibrato is too heavy, it makes the sound a little bit too forthright and a bit too sickly for the opening here, so keep it really, really still. Just something that floats, so it's not wallowing, it's just very, very lyrical and very, very fluid. Be clear on your articulation, however, because I think sometimes when we're playing slow things, we're so focused on the sound that we sometimes forget to be clear enough with the articulation. And there are some repeated notes in this opening passage that I think we need to just make sure they're spoken enough without being a tax, because we don't want that either. But I'll just show you in this second line here. Those B's, we just need to hear that as if they're two separate words. It's within a crescendo anyway, so the sound wants to build a little bit here. Again, not too much too soon. I would say only to mezzo piano, mezzo forte at the most, just so we're kind of opening the sound up a little bit like a flower sort of blooming at the top of the phrase here on the G sharp to A. Another repeated note there. Don't end it too softly, so don't diminuendo again, because the next phrase is back down to piano. I never like repeating things in pieces. I think it's nice if we can be more thoughtful about pianos. So we see two pianos, they don't necessarily need to be the same, and I think that's the case here. So again, here I would think quite intimate with the dynamic, but perhaps we can do something different with the vibrato. We could do something different with just the general colour, but I wonder if we can try the vibrato here. Something really shimmery in the sound, so it's kind of a bit more magical, this phrase. If we're keeping the opening quite plain, then that little shimmer in the sound will really bring it to life. Again, be careful it's not too deep and too heavy, that vibrato, because it will make the sound too intense for the character that we're trying to create here as the piece opens. At the end of this little section, however, we have a crescendo. The first time we don't, but here we want to kind of grow into this più mosso. So there we can be richer with the sound, perhaps a little bit more vibrato. We just need to show the difference. Again, I often use the analogy that if somebody was sitting down with the blank score, could they write in the markings that you're doing? It's a good test if you listen back and record yourself, which is so useful, painful but useful. Can you hear all these details if you didn't know they were there? The più mosso section here is a little bit more playful. I think we want to, yes, we need to keep the tempo a little bit more fluid, a bit moving a little bit more, but also in the sound, perhaps something a bit more energized, a bit more lively. Still in piano crescendo, so it's not suddenly a lot louder, it's just a case of changing the colour a little bit. There we've got these lovely tenutos, and I think that's such a great marking. Yum bum ba. Do something almost like you were bowing the notes on a string instrument. Yum bum ba. That physicality of the articulation that we don't have as flute players. It's a good way to test it. Can you sort of imagine what it would look like, that articulation, if you had to do something with your body? Yum bum ba. Slightly lifted, but also long. Then we have this crescendo to the middle of both phrases, actually. They need to be quite pronounced. Again, it's just like opening your heart and singing these crescendos as a little bit more, so that we feel that the middle of those phrases are a little bit sunnier. One thing I think it's important to be careful of is the rhythm, and it's not complicated, but bum ba ba beam ba ba bum. It's important to keep that really precise so it doesn't rush. Yum ba ba bee ba ba, yum ba ba beam ba ba bum ba ba bum. Just so it keeps that lyrical quality without feeling like suddenly we're panicking at all. There's another great colour change coming up, which is really wonderful if you can pronounce this as much as possible. So there we suddenly go to this C natural, which has a much more sort of hope to it. The dynamic doesn't change, but you can do something with the colour, with the vibrato, that just gives us that feeling that there's more hope in the sound there. It's so important to remember that you have a palette of dynamics, but you also have all these other palettes of things you can change about the sound. So the vibrato is one thing, the shape of the sound, the depth of the sound, the speed of your air, the shape internally. There's just so many things we can experiment with. Never just accept the sound is what comes out when you blow for the first time, even if you have a great sound, because that's, I think, even easier to be a little bit default with your tone if it sounds great. So find all these different options so that you can sort of pull out a new colour whenever you need it, and that will give your performance so many more dimensions, which will then communicate more in terms of character to your audience. I said at the start how we were going to talk a little bit more generally about tone, so I'm going to do that now. For me, the basis of a good sound begins with your posture. So it's always important, I think, to make sure that we're not kind of squashing anything. Keep nice and tall when you play so that you're giving your body more resonance. Singers do that so fantastically. You never see a hunched over singer. They always have this sort of proud stance, and that's because their body is their instrument, and that is exactly the case for a flute player. Just because we have this sort of thin silver tube, because it's a thin silver tube, we need to kind of add on to that by using our own body to create resonance as well. So treat your body as you would treat your flute. We would clean our flute out, we would give it a polish now and then, and we would always put it together properly. So the same with your body, kind of put your body together properly when you stand. Keep your feet flat on the floor, equal weight on each foot, and just keep that feeling that your sound is going up and out, particularly if you're playing in a big space, because obviously you don't want to play at the floor directly in front of you. You want your sound to go right out to the back of the hall, regardless of what dynamic you're playing. One of the main reasons for this good posture is so that we can breathe properly and we can breathe fully and well. And in a piece like the Gaubert Madrigal, which is why I think this is a great sort of exercise piece, if you like, for sound, the phrases are long, so we need to make sure that our breathing is really efficient and really effective. So the good posture allows you to hopefully to be as relaxed as possible and get your breathing nice and low in your body. So you're not breathing up here, your shoulders aren't coming up, but you're really allowing your breath to be stored lower down so that you can use it equally during the phrase. We don't want ever to sort of give all our air right at the beginning of the phrase and then be dying at the end. So look at your phrases and think, well, how far do I need to go? And just save your air through that phrase. It's a little bit like if you have 4 pot plants to water and you've got your watering can. You don't want to throw all your water onto the first plant really quickly, then you haven't got anything left. It's the same in a phrase. So just have that measure of the phrase so that you can use your air really, really efficiently and really well. The reason I think this piece is a great sort of exercise for sound is because it really allows you to think about the lyrical quality of your sound and the openness of your sound. It's not a kind of aggressive, edgy sounding piece in any way. It's really all about resonance and singing. So I think if we can really go for as open feeling in the throat as possible throughout, regardless of the register we're in, and actually also regardless of the dynamic we're in, because I think it's very easy to think about an open resonant sound as being a loud sound, and that needn't be the case and shouldn't be the case. Even when we're playing in a pianissimo dynamic, we still want to be as open and free as possible. And to be honest, that's the dynamic where we most often tighten, because playing quietly is difficult. So again, lots of feeling of this kind of open chest, almost like this is your kind of resonance chamber. In the throat, the best exercise for openness is yawning. So lots of yawning at any time of day is absolutely allowed, just to keep that openness in your throat. Particularly as you're going higher up on the instrument, because again, that naturally we tend to tighten the throat as we go higher. So that's where we need to feel like the throat sort of opens up a bit like a cave. Imagine a big cave inside. And that's where we allow the air to come through as unrestricted as it possibly can. And that will produce a much more sort of open and free sound when you blow. Seeing as we mentioned higher register there, I think we'll just go on to the next section of the madrigal here, which does go up to the top register. So we want to sing, really, really sing. It's interesting that a madrigal, is known as a vocal, unaccompanied vocal piece of music, secular, but from the Renaissance period. This is obviously nothing like that, but I wonder if it's nice to bear in mind that a madrigal is sung, because I think that can be a lovely way to think about how you play, as though you're just singing the notes. So really think, as you go up here, so we're not kind of tightening the lips, squeezing in the throat, we're just allowing everything to open so that the E, when we reach there, just floats out. The G flat's such a beautiful note in that phrase, because we're not expecting it, we're expecting, but so if you can do something with the colour on that note, it would be amazing. There's a diminuendo anyway, so just really take a little bit of time there as well, just to give yourself the space to do that colour change. Then we've got a writ in the next bar. So I always say that the breath should join what you're about to do. So the breath after this ritardando is very much showing what's about to come. So so we want to kind of propel ourselves into the next tempo, and the breath can really help you do that. Don't apologise for breathing. Breathing is such an expressive part of a flute player's language. So if you can allow your breathing to be as important as the notes you play, you'll get such a beautifully natural and expressive phrase that way. The second time this figure that appears in the writ bar comes is a few lines later, but this time there's no ritardander, so it's really important to keep it flowing through. It goes into a più mosso bar, which I think can be a little bit more moving, obviously, but not panicky in any way. I think it needs to feel more like a flourish than something that sounds out of control. So let's try it. So. And the writ just at the end there, and the grace notes, the mordant, it needs to be something almost a little bit charming and playful at the end of that bar, after all of this sort of frisson of excitement, and then we go back to our calmness that we had at the opening. One of the other reasons I've chosen this little passage to talk about is because the breathing is tricky here. It's 7+ bars that we need to get through without a breath. If you can do that, fantastic, but I want to give you an option if you don't feel comfortable doing that, and that's absolutely fine. So there are lots of options, I suppose, but this one I think works quite well, so I just want to play it to you so you can hear how it can work. Now, the important thing when you're adding in a breath that isn't sort of officially there is making sure that, first of all, it makes musical sense, and second of all, that you take it in the most expressive and sort of natural way you can, so that we feel that it should be there. That's kind of the best advice I can give, really. So this is how I would, if I needed a breath, this is how I would do it. And that will get you comfortably to the end of those low Ds, and then you can take your next breath. That's just one example. Try things out, experiment with them breathing wise. There's no right or wrong. Well, there are some wrong, but you'll know that yourself because it will feel unnatural. It's just about making something comfortable for you that then you can be as expressive and do everything you want to in terms of musical ideas and sound around that. We're reaching the final few lines of the piece now. Just one thing I want to highlight, and it's another beautiful moment. I love that F natural as you're coming down the scale. We're not expecting that because it's always been an F sharp. So a little linger on it I always think is really nice because it's just kind of a different feel at that moment. The final little flourish of this madrigal comes on the penultimate line, and it's to an F natural again. So in the key of G major, which we are here, it's the flattened seventh. So it's quite an expressive note. So I think, again, you can bring sort of something to this F natural, maybe a little bit extra vibrato. It's within a crescendo anyway, so that will be there. But it's nice to just bring a little bit of something in addition to that. I do it with a little bit of kind of spicy vibrato just to really make it stand out. The final phrase of the piece is so beautiful. Again, there's no writ here, so I would just be nice and simple at the end, just a little, maybe a bit of time into the last note, but don't overdo this this ending because it's such a beautifully simple piece. I think we want to keep it that way at the end. Try and stay as open as you can for the final B. We don't want to bring any tightness into the sound there, and just let that final phrase float up into the air. Thank you for joining me on this journey through Gaubert's Madrigal. I hope it's given you some ideas on the piece itself and also some things to think about with your sound. Thanks again, and hope to see you soon.